Welcome to the highlights of the Wednesday conference on December 16th, 2020, with Guttmann, President of the European Union of Jewish Students, Mila Stojanovic, Executive Director of the European Union of Jewish Students, and Sonja Viličić from Haver Srbija. 211 participants joined the conference hosted by Professor Dr. Andreas Maislinger.
Yeah, I'm happy to present a little bit our organization. So European Union of Jewish Students is an umbrella organization that represents 36 member unions. It's a 36 national unions in countries all over Europe, not only in European Union member countries. Jewish students are organized, and we are representing them in European institutions, in UN institutions, and from one side we do advocacy for Jewish people, working closely with all these institutions. From the other side, we support our member unions, and we are working with them in creating better future. So generally, the mission of our organization is to strengthen Jewish communities and European society. For us, Jewish rights are human rights are Jewish rights, so we are not working only within the Jewish communities, but generally with the European society. And one very important thing for us is that we are peer-led, we are a youth organization. So everybody that you will meet, you work with, they're all young, vibrant people, and we inspire each other, and we are making a positive change.
So Hanukkah basically in Hebrew means rededication, and it's a beautiful holiday, a holiday of light, and it's connected to the historical moment from the Jewish history when large Greek army conquered Jerusalem and went into the temple and tried to force Jews to take their culture, to take their religion, and brought into the temple their gods, which is something that is against the Jewish concept of believing in one God. And somehow Jews succeeded in kicking out the Greeks, and they cleaned the temple. So Hanukkah means actually cleaning and putting the temple back into its original function. And temple in those times was really a center of Jewish life. There were no synagogues around the world. People didn't know what to do. Everything happened in the temple, and it was led by priests. So without the temple, the Jewish people were basically lost. But this story says that the Jews won this battle. The minority actually won over majority. And if you ask me, there is also one more symbol in the Hanukkah, that when they rededicated the temple, they wanted to light on menorah, the most famous Jewish symbol, but they saw that they have just enough good oil that can last for one day, but a miracle happened, and this oil lasted for 8 days. That's why we celebrate Hanukkah 8 days each year. For me, Hanukkah is also, it's really a holiday that makes me proud, because just on this holiday, I think my culture and my religion is represented in media, on TV. If you ask people that are not Jewish, that will be probably the holiday that people heard of, because Hollywood loves it, and because it's very close to Catholic Christmas. So it makes me feel that I am included in the larger society as a Jew.
Actually, all four of my grandparents are Shoah survivors. My grandfather, my father's father, survived Auschwitz together with his brother and three of his sisters, while both his parents and another sister of his were killed by the Nazis alongside many other family members. The same is true for all my other grandparents. My father's mother actually fled to Shanghai and spent 10 years in Shanghai during the war. She was from Vienna. She can still remember Vienna from before the war, and can remember seeing Hitler speak on the Heldenplatz, where she was taken by her nanny, who later Aryanized her flat in Vienna, her family's flat in Vienna. And she then spent, after November pogroms, 10 years in Shanghai before being thrown out of China and returning to Austria. But many of her family members were also killed by the Nazis. My mother's parents are also Shoah survivors. My mother's father survived, hidden with a Christian family, first in Krakow. He's from Krakow, and then later in Hungary, and then ended up in Austria. And my mother's mother actually is also a survivor and was first hidden in Belgium and later France, but her family is actually from one of the 7 Jewish communities in Burgenland. So with that backstory, of course, it always played a big role in my life. There's no question about that. And I was also lucky in a sense that my grandparents, and especially my grandfather who survived Auschwitz, always talked about his experience. What is easier for me in my generation than it was for my parents' generation, and certainly my grandparents' generation, is the relationship to Austria. Because I cannot understand, to be honest, with all of you, how my grandparents could decide to come back to Austria or could decide to live in Austria. And of course, for all of them, it was not a choice. Like all of them did not plan to spend the rest of their lives in Austria, but rather ended up in Austria, and most of them in DP camps, and then kind of stayed in Austria and never left, and then already had started their lives in Austria. And that question of identity has certainly changed through the generations. Because while my grandparents, like my grandfather, hated Austria for the rest of his life, and very understandably so, even though he managed to have quite a good life in Austria. And that question of identity then changed a lot of generations because me as a 3rd generation survivor, I enjoyed a very good life in Austria. I grew up in Vienna, which is not only the best city in the world in general, but also as a Jew, a great city. Vienna was a great place to grow up as a Jew, and Vienna, of course, has a difficult history, but Vienna has a very vibrant Jewish community that I experienced growing up and that I really enjoyed growing up. Still, the relationship with Austria and with Austria's patriotism is a difficult one. So that was definitely a motive that runs through my life, but also the life of other 3rd generation survivors, this question of identity. And this is true, I think, for most 3rd generation survivors, whether in Austria or in Germany. Although I guess it is still a little bit harder in Austria than in parts of Germany, as Austria has done a worse job than Germany with dealing with its own past, although that is now slowly changing to the better. But there's still much work to do, as I'm sure you all agree. At the same time, of course, this legacy has also in some ways powered my activism and has led me to become active. There's also no question about that. On the one hand, because in some sense, it's really not a choice, I think. Because I think in some ways, growing up openly Jewish in Europe, and especially in a country like Austria, itself is already a first step towards activism. Because even though we in general enjoy a good life right now, and in general have in Vienna really one of the best lives that Jews can have all over the world, I would say, the reality of my generation of young Jews is still that we grew up behind barbed wires, behind big walls and so on. Like we are used when we are entering Jewish institutions to passing armed security guards, to being questioned by security guards. I went to the Jewish school in Vienna, which looks more like a prison than like a school, and is one of the most secure buildings in Vienna, I think. And that is normality for us, still in 2020.
Thank you for listening to the highlights of the Wednesday conference on December 16th, 2020. For further details on upcoming conferences, as well as general information about the Austrian Service Abroad, please visit our website www.auslandsdienst.at.